Hello and welcome to the 3,500 Miles Between Us podcast with your hosts Jobie and Abigail.
All right, guys, and welcome to another episode. If you haven't heard the previous podcasts on me and Jobie, it's just Abigail and Jobie, by the way. If you haven't heard the other podcasts about Abigail kind of interviewing my trip to South America, periodically we've been jumping in and out of current affairs, and then we're also kind of trying to sprinkle in each other's stories. So this is another one of those, kind of a continuation of me probably when I was about 18 or 19. I went to Venezuela when I was 16. And then eventually we'll talk about Abigail's life when she's ready.
Yes. But you should definitely check out part 1 and part 2 of Jobie's adventures in Venezuela if you want to get the backdrop of where we're launching off today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all had extraordinary lives. I believe that all the common man that's not famous and on the, in Hollywood has all had everyone's had an extraordinary life. And it's funny how we're fascinated with famous people's lives, but the common man, even though I don't consider myself a commoner, but when you AB yourself with famous people, have had really extraordinary lives, and I definitely have had a pretty colorful life, and so I think part of the reason we started this podcast was just to kind of get that all out, record
it's documenting it almost, because you've talked so many times, should I write a book, or tell your kids these crazy stories. And in one respect, I think this is an amazing way of documenting it forever.
Yeah.
And your kids and your grandchildren could go back and listen to this, and it's all going to be there, which I think's fantastic. I mean, what a great way of documenting your life, because writing a book, everyone's got a book in them, but I don't think many people have the ability to write a book.
No, and I think that I struggle with imposter syndrome, where I'm like, well, who's interested in my story? Why am I so special? And it's kind of this false humility. And really, when you think about it, we've got one life to live. I've lived half my life, and I want to try and creep out from under that rock of being ashamed of just sharing my stories. I always struggled with that, and I'm kind of working in the opposite flow.
Yeah.
We've got what would it be? My dad's dad. So who would he be? My great uncle?
No, your grandfather.
My grandfather. I'm not very good at these things. He before he died, he recorded his stories, and if he hadn't have done that, he would have died with all other stories, and they're fantastic stories. And his son had the wherewithal to give him a microphone and a tape recorder and say, just record your stories. And I've listened to them, and they bring tears to my eyes. And I think that would have been so sad to have not had that. I would have never known those things about his life. When
you see those reels where it's like the streets of New York in the 1930s, and you see all of those men running around in suits on Wall Street or wherever, they'll often publish now restored reels from that era. And I look at those and I think nameless people whose stories have disappeared, all in a hurry to get somewhere, but we have no idea who they are. Mm-hmm. And their existence evaporates within one generation. And, it's amazing to think, we've talked about this a lot, where in not too distant future, our existence, our name will be meaningless, strangely. And once our children die, the stories and the memory of us will go with them.
Yeah.
Unless you're someone like Nelson Mandela or someone who's, done something where you get notoriety, the common man or the peasant or whatever is, their story isn't remembered.
No, and it's humbling to think that. I think it's hard on the ego to think that, even my own children, like I think about how much I talk about our dad who's gone. Not
Not
very
very
often.
often.
Not very often. And it's
What
like,
about your grandfather? Not at all.
not at all, yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, these are the people that were closest to them, and we just kind of move on with our lives. And really, when you think about like, like the Vikings or, the kind of folks from way, way back in the day, that storytelling around the fire was their only entertainment because they
Yeah.
didn't have televisions and phones and books. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, imagine sitting around a fire with your family. You'd have heard the story so many times, but you'd want to hear it again. And we've lost the art of doing that, I think, because we've got entertainment now. We've got at least outsourced our entertainment. Um, so yeah. But
So we
before
should.
we,
Oh
what's
yeah,
that?
yeah. No,
Before we,
you want to do a shout out.
yeah, I want to do a shout out to our friend Jewel, who's DM'd us on Instagram and said she loves the podcast, she's loving the stories. And I just want to say, hey, Jewel, if you're listening, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for your kind
Yay.
words.
And anyone who wants to DM us and ask questions or ask us to talk about a topic, we would love that communication. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, because it's a fair bit of time commitment to do this, and definitely a lot of work on the technical side of things. I'm not very good at it, and trying to figure it all
For
out.
two tech-phobic people
Oh
who
my
just want to
God.
throw computers out the window, it's a miracle that we're here today.
And anyone out there who knows how to get my podcast onto Apple it's just been like, I tried again last night and it says processing, right? It's been processing for 48 hours. I'm like, you're not processing nothing. Spotify was a
Well,
piece of cake. Apple's been an absolute nightmare.
Steve Jobs has let us down.
You've noticed,
Oh, it's meant to be intuitive.
Yeah, come back from the dead and just
Yeah,
upload my podcast.
sort it out, mate.
Sort it.
So we should jump right back into, you've returned from Venezuela. You're now, what, 16, 17?
Yeah, about 17, I'd say.
Back in England. And you're working on farms?
Yeah, it's hard to remember that portion because you have these kind of like these peaks in your life where you remember very, very vividly. And then there's the kind of in-between parts that are a little more foggy. But I remember coming back, and I think I talked about this a little bit on the other ones, but it was very hard for me for re-entry because no one really understood how passionate I was and how much I wanted to go back. So I really just suppressed all of that passion because unfortunately, I think the UK's biggest strength, the UK people, is our sarcasm and our ability to laugh at ourselves. But the dark side of that is that we're not very good at encouraging and pushing forward and saying, yeah, you should go do that. We're always trying to bring everyone down to our level. And I think that I miss that humor in a way, but there's a part of it where it can really, stop people rising to the top. And I remember that, and I had worked so much to get to Venezuela. I think I was doing construction. So Abigail and I got pulled out of public school. I don't know, Abigail, did you even go to public school?
I was 7. I only went to public school for 2 years. And
Right.
you probably more like 10 or 11 when you got pulled.
Yeah, and I had an awful time at school. Like, I'd get beaten up all the time. I had not really friends. I really struggled with school. Both with the academic side of it and also just socially. And I think because we grew up in a small town and our parents were pastors and they were not just your average, they were starting a home church, the word got around very fast. And so I would be called Bible basher and often get pushed.
Well, Mum and Dad were preaching on the streets and doing worship on the streets.
Oh.
And they were, though. Like, Dad would do it in the arcade where it was echoey. So he would preach in an echoey tunnel arcade, where there were these stores.
We call them arcades. That would be our mall, right? An arcade would be a mall.
Yeah, if that. I mean, this was like the most dialed down version of that. But
like 5 stores.
I don't even know what you'd call it now. But anyway, like a strip mall, I don't know. It echoed so that his voice would project, and then Mum would get out a guitar and sing worship music. So can you imagine our street cred was in the gutter? And everyone knew that was our parents. So it's not surprising that you got bullied, because man, that was rough on a kid.
Yeah, and then Mum would put me in dance around the fucking maypole, maypole dancing.
Yeah, which
with
I don't
ribbons.
think exists. I don't think that exists here.
It does, because I've seen it at carnivals.
It's kind of like Scottish dancing,
I can
almost.
the music is like forever embedded in my head.
Is it bagpipes?
And I used to have to hold hands with this girl. I can't remember her name, but she had warts on her hands.
Oh my God.
And she knew I didn't like her, and she would squeeze my hand so tight. And so embarrassing.
Country bumpkins and religious country bumpkins, you were just bound to get a good rollicking.
Yeah, and then every summer in what we call secondary school, which would be high school here, there is programs. So you can go canoeing or hiking, or you go to France, so you do all these things. Well, we were so poor that every summer we had to do the acting one. So we stayed home, walked up to the school when everyone else was doing these crazy, extravagant trips, and act in a play. Yay. I mean, it's all right that
building.
It's all right that but yeah. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
So you worked from an early age, and all of us did, because
right.
we weren't in school.
Mum pulled us out of school to get Christian schooled, and she understood that I was just very dyslexic, and back in those days, when you're dyslexic, you were stupid, and in England they call you thick. You're thick, and there was so much damage done, I think, from being that I just couldn't break through that. Like tests, even when I do, like, say, a written test for a driving test or something, I start to break out in sweats.
Yeah.
And
so do you think, in a way, being pulled from school for your dyslexia was actually a relief?
Well, it wasn't for dyslexia. I don't know why Mum's reason was. I think it was religious based, right? Like, I think I mean, holy shit, man. Like, there was no woke culture then, but is there ever now? Like, and she still felt the need to pull us out.
Right, because they believe we were being raised by the state. And in those days in England, people thought that what they were doing was actually illegal. To school your kids at home was absolutely unheard of. It was sensational.
Yeah, and now it's it's so common now.
Oh, like, my God, yeah. The only people that were doing it in England were American missionaries.
Yeah.
Who came from America, and that was commonplace in America, and we would start to connect with these American families. But as far as English people being schooled at home, that was considered, people thought it was illegal.
Yeah.
So it was very sensational what they did, and very kind of like ahead of their time. But I was just wondering whether it was good for you because you weren't being bullied then, and you could actually work.
Well, like, so before we went to Venezuela, we were doing homeschool, and there was these builders working on our house, and I would go and, in my break time, I would go mix cement for them in the cement mixer. And they just took such a shine, like, they could see how much I loved work, that they said, when you're done school, come and ask us for a job. And Mum said to me, I think when I was 16, this is just before Venezuela, she goes, you know what, I can tell that you're hating this, you're not good at it. And I would buckle down and do my work. She goes, if you want to go, just go. And I'm like, and I felt like, oh my God, that was my ticket. Like, that's all I needed. And I went and got a full-time job before Venezuela, so 16, for these builders. And they treated me like an absolute slave, like an Egyptian slave.
Wow.
And I loved it.
How much were you getting a day or an hour? How much were you paid?
I think I was paid 50 pence.
So about $1, if that, 70 cents.
But before that, I was working for the Gilberts at a farm.
Oh my God.
And so I just loved work. I've always loved work.
How much did they give you?
So they were paying me. So friends of ours had this farm called, I can't remember the farm, they're called the Gilberts, and they now live in New Zealand. Lovely family. And so they had this farm that was really falling apart. And they said, Jobie, come and work for me. So I would work from 6 a.m. until probably 10 or 11 at night.
Wow.
It was a milking farm. And I loved it. I just loved the whole they let me drive a tractor when I was so small I could barely reach the clutch. It was so dangerous. Like I had to pull on the steering wheel and push my body down to get the clutch down so I could pull the transmission out of gear. And if I had fell off the clutch, it would have just taken off and just crashed into something. But they were so trusting, and their house was like, it had a stream running through the middle of it.
Yeah.
And all the windows that they had put in, they didn't bother fixing the perimeter. So the draft would come straight through the sides of the windows. So I remember being so cold at night that, I'd put all my clothes inside my sleeping bag and get dressed. And at one time, their ceiling fell down because it's lath and plaster, which is like old house, right? And the ceiling fell down. So instead of cleaning up the ceiling, they just put a carpet on top of it. So their dining room was like walking on a sand dune.
Oh, it's outrageous.
And the reason that they didn't,
stream.
they didn't fix their house up was because they were waiting for the millennium, which a lot of Christians believe that, I don't know the full ins and outs, but Jesus is going to come back and rule for 1,000 years on earth.
So what's the point of renovating?
Yeah, and they would be out loud about it. I'm like, why don't you fix this up? We're waiting for the millennium.
Yeah.
Oh, all right then.
I wonder what they told themselves when the millennium came and went.
Yeah. Well, Dorothy's gone.
But I think you were paying 25 pence an hour. Is that how much they paid you?
No, they were paying me 10 pence an hour. And when my dad found out, and I didn't care. I didn't need the money, and I just loved the work. My dad found out, and this is about the first and only, I think there's only a couple times that Dad's actually stood in the gap for me, Mm. And I was embarrassed about it. He went to them and said, look, you can't do this. And so I think they gave me a raise to 25 pence an hour, or maybe 75 pence an hour. Maybe I was getting 25 and they raised me to 75 pence an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was working like a full grown man,
wow.
Doing everything. So, and the same thing happened with the stent. So when we lived at Cana Pen Bowes. Do you have your window open, Abby?
Yeah, is it a bit loud?
It is, yeah.
I might overheat, but we'll try.
I remember when we lived in this one house, in harvest time, when the straw would get delivered, they would bring these semi-trucks full of straw back to the barn. I would ride my bike and follow the trucks up the road and for free help them unload the bales of hay into the barn. It was hard work.
Wow.
But I just loved work. And then eventually those guys offered me a job. So I'm a firm believer. And I tell this to my kids all the time. I'm like, just keep doing the best you can do at whatever you're asked to do. And people will notice and they'll want to hire you.
Yeah, agreed. Show
still
yourself to be willing.
Yeah. So anyway, a bit of a
tangent.
Tangent there.
So you worked before Venezuela, and then when you came back, you carried on doing farm work?
Yeah, I came back, and I think I carried on with the builders for a bit. And then I got in with Guy. So there was this, in England, there's still estates. So these massive stately homes that have 20 bedrooms or so with servants and cooks and kitchen staff and forest staff and games wardens that take care of all of the game. And so there was one in England, in Launceston where we lived, called Warrington Park. And it was one of the only, there's only a handful in England that were actually functioning like they used to function. So they still had servants, they still had cooks, still had a kitchen garden, a gardener, and all of this stuff. So it was a huge estate. They owned tons of acres and they owned lots of properties around the peripheral. And so the son of the owner of that estate, who was a lord, he was called Lord something.
Really? What Guy's called Lord? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. And
Guy's dad.
Alex,
yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Alex's dad, yeah.
No, that wouldn't have been Alex. That was Guy's dad.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, Alex lived in one of the homes.
Right, okay.
That was attached to the estate. So I guess I got a job somehow. Man, it's all starting to explode in my head, everything. All the stuff at that age. And I went, Yeah, I went to Guy and asked him. I think he was hiring or something, or someone gave me the referral, and I went and worked for him. He had a lawnmower, like he sold brand new lawnmowers and ride-on lawnmowers, and so he said, I've got all these friends that need their lawns cut, and you can cut grass for me, and I'll give you a van and a trailer and a ride-on lawnmower, and that's what you'll do. You'll just drive around and cut grass, and so that's what I did, and it was very, very hectic, and it was like huge gardens I had to do. I remember cutting grass at night with lights on and everything, and getting into trouble because when you're young, you don't really understand things that you shouldn't do and should do. You just kind of push the envelope, and then you realize, oh yeah, probably not good to show up at 10 o'clock at night and start the lawnmower and start cutting someone's grass. But at the time, I was like, oh, they'll like it because I'm working hard.
Right. Forget the fact that they want to sleep.
Yeah. And I remember just as a young boy, I got noticed. I didn't get noticed for academia, but I got noticed for hard work, and that kind of that was kind of the currency that was kind of in my head. I'm like, work hard equals respect.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is that people actually abuse that and work you to the bone. And so there was kind of I remember this journey of having to, yeah, I mean, I felt like I definitely got abused by employers. They would just work me and work me and work me and work me, and I would just keep on working. And if they weren't happy, I remember coming home and feeling very nauseous, and I was just this people pleaser. I had to have their approval. So yeah, I mean, I worked for this, guy cutting grass, and then I started to get to know some of these people and lawyers and different folks around the town, because they were all the upper class folks, the
Right.
hired gardeners, the people with lots of money and big houses, and they kind of took a shine to me. I don't know why. I was just kind of this kid that would show up all happy to work, and people just took a shine to me. But I remember trying to navigate the thin line between an employee and a friend, and it was very hard for me. I got in too deep with some clients in a way, and kind of overstepped. I was just trying to understand, because dad and mom were at that point. I was living outside the home.
Oh.
I think I was 17 when I got a rental house up. And so that dance between, being an employer, having a joke with them, having a laugh, and then them inviting me into the home. And then I think looking back, I was so hungry for closeness, maybe, or a family or something. Like I was just hungry for some type of intimacy. I didn't really know what was happening, but I just would gravitate toward. And I remember going to people's houses and saying to myself in my head, I wonder how long it will be until I'm eating dinner at their table.
Right.
And sure enough, it would happen. But
Yeah.
the problem is I didn't know how to create boundaries. And
So
so
you would get too familiar with them.
kind of
they
too
would feel that.
kind of too familiar, and then when they would kind of like brush me off, like, no, we're having proper friends over now or something, I would be really hurt.
Right.
Because I was like, oh, I don't understand this kind of, you want me when you want me, but when you don't want me, I'm expected to just walk away. And so I probably opened my heart up a bit too much.
And probably you were encountering the class system of England. So they were upper class, you were middle-ish class, and they're quite happy to converse with people of a different class. But then there's the closed inner circle that you're not invited into.
Yeah, like
And that's a very British thing.
Yeah, like Warrington Park would have, they had two game wardens, and they would rear up thousands and thousands and thousands of pheasants, and then people from London would come down, and it's called buying a gun. So you would pay hundreds of, like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars for the privilege of shooting on that property all winter. And so when those people would come down, it was like everything changed. It was like I was now the slave, You
Yeah.
didn't talk to us. You don't come over to our side. You don't say hi to me. I remember a guy just ignoring me when all his peers were around and it was the shooting season.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. And I was hired just to be a beater. So we would go into the forest and beat the pheasants up into the air, and then they would shoot them down. And there was a hard line. You didn't cross over that line. You didn't go talk to them.
And yet, as soon as those people left, they were all chummy with you again.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was hard to navigate when no one's coaching you through it, you know?
Yeah. That
Um,
would have felt like betrayal in a way. I can see why you've got that underlying, last week these people were inviting me into their kitchen and now you're being treated entirely differently.
yeah. It was confusing. It was really
Yeah.
confusing and hurtful.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, I look at my son and I'm always coaching him. I'm always helping
Yeah.
him to navigate these things, and I didn't have that. So it was like,
No.
and then there was Joe, and that was a big blip on the calendar,
Mm.
on the calendar of my life. So I had this client that I was cutting the grass, and then all of a sudden they said, "Why don't you come back and do more work for us?" And so it was Joe and Mark Parnell, and
So is Joe a girl, a female?
yeah, Joe's a
Yeah, okay.
female, and she must have been about 35 then.
And she was married to Guy?
So she was married to Mark.
Okay.
So Guy referred me to them. I cut their grass, and then I became friends with them. And so Crackington Haven was where Abigail and I were raised all summer. So it's a beach. It's kind of like our spot. I think it's just probably
Yeah.
the closest thing to my heart when it comes to England.
Yeah.
So every summer we would go down there and spend our entire summer at this little hole in the wall type of beach area, and we would know it like the back of our hands. And so Mark had built this kind of a mansion at Crackington Haven, and so I was taking care of his property, and he was a lawyer. And I remember he chain smoked and drove a Porsche, and looking back, he was definitely into some illegal stuff because he had a lot of money.
Right.
And his wife was Joe, and she was like, I don't know. She was like, I was enamored by her. She was gorgeous. She was super fashionable. She had like a lingerie store in town. Um,
And how
and
old were you? 17?
I was like 17 or
Definitely
18.
underage.
Definitely underage. So she would just like, hello, Jobie, what's going on? And how are you doing? And I was like her pet.
And she was what, 30?
She would have been, I remember when she turned 40. And so she was about 35.
Wow. Okay.
Always wore the shortest mini skirt you've ever seen. Always. Always super tanned, or, drove like a maniac.
Oh.
And I guess if I'm honest, I'd say I'd fell in love with her. I was just completely enamored by her.
Do you think you were infatuated?
Yeah, infatuated.
Yeah.
Because I saw how badly she was being treated by Mark. And I was like, I think being raised with sisters, the advantage of being raised with sisters is that you're really in touch with your feminine side. And so you're really in touch with feelings. Like when you're raised with, if I had 3 brothers, I wouldn't be like that. It would all be fighting and wrestling and macho stuff. But I was raised on watching My Fair Lady and Mary Poppins and
Anna Green Gables.
I was in love with Anna Green Gables.
You actually read Anna Green Gables, the book, didn't you?
I had a picture of Megan Follows right beside my bed, and I kissed it many times.
You did read the book, though, did you not?
Oh no, I didn't do that. I won't go that far.
But you
I fell in love
grew up on period drama. Scarlet Pimpernel, all of the dream, like North and South.
Yeah. When we dressed up and played pretend, it was like swords and squashbuckling and.
Yeah, but I mean, what's interesting is with 3 sisters, what you were watching. Yes, you watched Rambo and Indiana Jones, but you watched a hell of a lot of period drama as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what Mum made us watch. And so when I would talk to women, older women, I was able to connect with them on a level that most, they were like, oh, this guy's like an old soul.
Mm.
And I could talk about feelings and I didn't, and I guess it was like a bit of a superpower that I discovered that got me into a hell of a lot of trouble.
The beginnings of becoming a player
Oh my God.
started right then.
And this, yeah. And so, and I was definitely drawn to women that were older, much older than me, because I found young girls or people my age just so bloody boring.
Mm.
And I guess I was a bit beyond my years as far as a certain type of maturity. And
Well,
so,
you'd had to grow up really quickly. If you're out of the home at 16, most 16-year-olds were not living your life.
yeah, had my own business, paying rent, you know,
Yeah.
had an employer from time to time.
Employee.
Employee, sorry.
Yeah.
From time to time. And yeah, I was just thrown in at the deep end and I loved it. That's what it was, you know. But so Joe, you know, like Mark would come back super late at night sometimes. And so I would just, after work, I would just go into the house and sit and have tea with Joe and talk. And she would just be doing her cooking. And we just became really, really good friends. But I don't think she didn't understand how much my heart was being attached to her.
Mm.
I think for her, it was like, oh yeah, Jobie's great company. Because at nighttime, when you don't have social media and you're in the middle of the countryside alone, it's quiet. And
Yeah.
it's like, there's nothing going on. And just to have someone there to talk to.
The impression I got that she was very unhappy in her marriage, perhaps,
Oh
and
yeah,
she wasn't a happy person.
She was so unhappy. And I think I felt like I could rescue her and save her. And I was willing to put my happiness on the line for her. And so she would call me sometimes, like I lived a half hour, maybe 45-minute drive away, and she would call me, what are you doing tonight? And I would drive all the way over there and spend like, even if I spent 10 minutes around her, it was okay. And eventually Mark, so this is where it started to get muddy because there was a big party at their house one time and they asked, it was a shooting, so they would have pheasant. He had his own pheasants too. And he said, we're going to have this big party and you can just be like you can beat the pheasants and then just be a servant kind of while we have. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I went over there and things got crazy and everyone was, I didn't know then because I was so innocent that there was a lot of like cocaine and all of that going on. And I don't know, I think there was a fist fight because Mark saw Joe. I think he was very jealous of Joe, even though he didn't treat her very well. He was very jealous of her. She was like a trophy wife. And I think Joe was friendly with one of the other blokes and he punched him in the face. There was blood everywhere and it was like just so dramatic. And I realized I was getting tangled into something that I couldn't navigate my way out of. And eventually Mark started to feel like I was moving in on his wife.
Right.
And although he didn't love her, there's no way he loved her. He didn't treat her with any type of care. He kicked me out and all the connections that I had. So his brother was another lawyer. They let me go. So, and his dad was another lawyer that I worked for. They let me go. So it's just like a house of cards.
Wow.
And I remember
Devastating.
feeling devastated and such a fool, like I'd been played for the fool.
And what did she do within that?
So she eventually left him and we carried on a friendship. And I remember Mum, like I would come home at midnight and so I think this is in between moving out of the house. But I remember Mum, and this is one thing I really respected about Mum, is when I turned 18, she let me go. Like she knew, she was concerned, but she didn't try and get into my affairs. And I know that they were concerned about Joe because I think one time Joe came over and dropped off a present for me for Christmas and I wasn't there.
Okay. So they knew something was up.
They knew something was up. And so yeah, Joe left Mark and I was still working out of Crackington doing for other people like Mr. Bragg. And I remember having lunch on the beach in my truck and Joe came running down. She parked behind me and came running in and her fingers were like yellow. And I didn't understand at the time, but she was full-on alcoholic, and so there's no circulation in her hands because she'd been drinking so much. Her blood was
Wow.
thin right down, and she was just so unhappy, and it really broke my heart.
And when you got fired, did she intervene? She obviously didn't intervene. Was she just used to this kind of chaos?
Yeah, I kind of hid it from her, I guess. I can't really remember. It's a bit foggy, but she eventually moved out, and we just carried on being friends. And then she invited me to Spain. Her ex-husband she was still friends with, and she said, why don't you come to Spain? And my ex has got a yacht, and we're going to go
So
sailing.
her ex before Mark?
Before Mark. And I met him, and he was pretty cool, but man, did they party. But in retrospect, when you're kind of innocent, you don't know that people are doing drugs or this kind of stuff. You think, oh, they're just acting a bit weird.
I know. I look back now and I'm like, they were definitely on drugs. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And that level of innocence, it was happening under my nose, and I still didn't connect the dots because I had no frame of reference for drugs. Like, we just didn't grow up around any of that. So I wouldn't be suspicious.
No, I mean, I see it in my kids, when they're like, when they start to do the math of like, even Amelia's starting to figure out how she was made, so sex is coming into her mind. And you can see her face is like doing the math. And it's like, so, ooh.
What? Oh. But what shocks me even now, because I still have never been one for drugs, is I still get shocked when people talk about, say, a line of Coke, because in Nova Scotia, Coke is a hugely popular drug.
Really?
Oh my God, it's so popular. And people will say, like, I'll talk to a friend, she'll say, yeah, my friends on laundry day, they'll do a line of Coke in order to get their housework done quicker. I'm like, who are these people? What? I'm still shocked when I know people who will do Coke on a night out and talk about it like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And
weird.
To me, that's a massive deal. How? Yeah. What? Even if they're not druggies, Coke is there for entertainment and for a night out. A friend of mine called me up the other day and he said, I forgot my debit card at home. Would you lend me some money for the night out? And I said, well, I was thinking in my mind $100. Like, how much do you need? And he's like, $800. And I'm like, $800 for a night out? What on earth are you doing? I said, no, I don't have that kind of money just lying around. And I know people who will part with $1,000, $2,000 on a night out because they start getting into the drugs. And I'm like, this is not my normal baseline. You're like, no way. And these are people that I get on well with, but they'll come out with this shocking figure of, well, it's a night out, might do some Coke and go gambling. Okay. This is not the train station I'm used to kind of showing up to.
No, I mean, I've still never done any hard drugs, and I barely drink, and I barely smoke weed, and yeah, I don't. Well, that's another whole story, right? I just don't like being out of control.
So coming back to
Jo.
She invited you to Spain.
Yeah, so she invited me to Spain and to go sailing with her ex, and man, that was just like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, right? Like,
did you go?
So I told Mum and Dad that this might be happening, and Mum and Dad barely ever spoke into my life, and I think for good or for bad. Like, sometimes I think I would have. I don't think Mum and Dad had established a rapport with me where I would have actually respected much of what they had told me as far as direction goes, because there was such a lack of intimacy there, and I was such a troubled child with my relationship with Mum and Dad. But Dad said to me, I think Mum and Dad had talked about it, and they said, Jobie, something along the line, like paraphrasing, like, this does not feel good to us. We really, really encourage you, don't do this. And that kind of sat with me. And I knew it was a big deal, like going to Spain and sailing. I'm like, half of me wanted to go all in on it, but half of me was like, oh shit, like, I've got to leave my home and my business and how long this is going to go on for. And Joe's a bit of a loose cannon, but heck, this could be where me and Joe actually, something happens.
But
And
also,
I've
they got this money resource that you don't have, where they could probably just go and not plan when they're coming back.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I didn't go. And Joe was like, "Oh, that's sad," and I was bummed out, but I didn't go. So Joe goes to Spain. They jump on this yacht. The yacht gets the Coast Guard comes and finds the yacht. The yacht is full of cocaine.
Wow.
So Joe was trafficking cocaine with her ex, and I was going to be on that boat. Joe ended up doing 3 or 4 years in jail,
No
and
way.
I would have been an accessory to that, so I would have gone juvenile jail. So
Unbelievable. I didn't know
dodged,
that.
yeah, so I dodged a huge bullet. Um, and I still carried on talking, like Joe and I've got letters from her, like she wrote to me from jail.
Mm.
And I wrote to her back, and when she got out of jail, I think I visited her, and that by this time she had moved up to the Midlands. Um, so the thread of me and Joe lasted a very long time.
Yeah.
I was still enamored by her in some way, and yeah, it was confusing as fuck.
Mm.
Um, and then I think after, I mean, jumping way forward, when Jen and I were married and had Raven, when we moved back to England, we were down at Crackington,
She just shows up, doesn't
and
she?
she was just there, and she had a kid.
Oh.
And I remember because I was talking to her, and her kid kept sticking her hand right down her mum's top, wanting milk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said to Joe, "How long have you been out of jail?" I mean, she goes, "Shh," because everyone in Crackington is like a gossip.
Right.
And I was like, "Oops, shouldn't have said that." Anyway, she said, "Come back to my place. Come over and see me tonight." And this was like years and years later. Like I'd already been married on my second marriage, had 2 kids. Dad had died, moved back to England. Lots of water had passed under the bridge. Hadn't even thought about her.
Yeah.
And I remember she told me where she was staying. And I remember and we were staying at the Dubienics little chalet. And I was so tempted to go over there, but I knew, because obviously I was super into the Christian thing then, and I knew it was just Danger Bay. I remember
Yeah.
just having this tug of war inside, and still then, all that time later.
A decade, probably.
Yeah, and
Probably at least a decade.
And she was probably around 50 then,
She still looked great.
in my eyes.
Yeah. But I wonder whether also there was that vulnerability to her, like that kind of fragile, wounded sparrow type woman that.
Yeah, I think it was all of it. I mean, she was definitely in Launceston, where we grew up. Joe stood out like a sore thumb because she had incredible fashion sense. She was sexy. She wore mini skirts all the time. She was like a London girl in Launceston, and so
Right.
I loved the fact that people were talking about me and her behind.
Right.
Like Julie Napper.
Yeah.
Our friend, we were dropping all these names. People were like, who the fuck are you talking about? Who's the Nappers? And she was like, what's going on? And I just love this kind of
The
like
sensation of it all.
the secretiveness of it all.
Yeah.
And everything. I mean, I used to she had a lingerie shop, and I would just go in there and sit in the corner, and clients would come in and leave, and I would just be sitting there. And then when they would leave, Joe and I would just talk.
Yeah, yeah.
So funny.
So everything's perfectly normal. So
Perfectly
in
normal.
there, where did your first significant accident take place?
Oh, we'll get into that. So let me think. So yeah, Venezuela, the first one was the tree that came down and crushed the tree. And we talked about how that was potentially, Mum thought it was a curse. Then I came back, and I just started having accident after accident. So I worked for a guy doing forestry work, and he left me out in the forest and said, here's a chainsaw, here's a log splitting machine, fill this trailer full of logs, and I'll come back and pick you up at the end of the day. I'm like, cool. So I was splitting logs on this log splitter on the back of a tractor, and it got jammed up. So I had to chainsaw the log off the splitter because it was jammed into it. And as I was chainsawing, I kind of looked over to make sure that the blade of the chainsaw wasn't hitting the steel of the splitter, and I felt this tug on my jeans. And I knew immediately what happened, because chainsaws don't have a soft touch. And I turned the chainsaw off and I didn't look down. And I was like, fuck. This is not good. And I eventually had the courage to look down at my leg, and my leg had opened up probably around 3 or 4 inches in width and was over the entire circumference of my leg. So I think about 8 or 9, maybe 10 inches long. And I looked down, I could see the bone of my leg, and I could see the main artery. So if I'd have hit the artery, it'd have been over. And so I'm by myself in the middle of the forest, and I pulled off my belt and tightened my belt above my leg to try and relieve the pain.
And was there a lot of pain?
There was a lot of pain, but there wasn't a whole lot of blood. But the wound was full of sawdust, and I could see the white of my bone. So it was really deep. And I started to pass out because it was a hot day. And I just laid down on a log, and I could feel myself starting to go to sleep. And this was probably around 12 o'clock. So Roger, the guy that hired me, wasn't going to come out there until maybe 5 or 6. And then I heard this tractor coming down the field over the stream where I was, and he came down, and the tractor stopped, which was unusual. Maybe he got out to check something, and I started shouting. And he got back in his tractor, started it up, and drove away.
Oh, man.
And so I was like, okay, so this is going to end bad. I need to be proactive and do something here. And so I dragged myself onto the tractor that had the wood splitter on it, started the tractor up. And at this point, I had no driver's license. And I drove through the forest, and then I'm like, I really got to go pee. So I remember stopping the tractor, standing on the outside of the tractor and peeing. It's like you're on death's door, but I got to go pee.
Do it the proper way. You could have just peed where you were.
Yeah, could just pee my pants.
Yeah.
And then I got back up and then drove down, and then the gate was closed of the forest. And I'm like, most people would have probably just driven through the gate, but I had to stop the tractor, get out, get off, drag myself over to the gate, open the gate, go back on the tractor, drive through the gate.
What was the pain like at this point? Was it throbbing pain, or was it acute agony?
Yeah, it was really bad. It was like really throbbing, and the shock was coming in, so I was starting to feel really nauseous.
And was there a lot of blood now?
Not a whole lot of blood, because it was all muscle. Had I hit that artery, it would have been brutal, because that's a main artery, right?
Yeah.
And then I went and closed the gate behind me, doing the right thing.
So you went to the toilet properly. You closed the gate properly.
Yeah. Picked up my recycling. So then I drive down, I get onto the road, and then people are coming behind me and honking their horns because I'm driving so slowly and they want to get by me. And I'm like trying to point to my leg, and they just and I pulled over, and then they would just wave at me and honk their horn and drive on. Not understanding what I was getting at.
Didn't you see the owners of your people you knew on the road? Did I have?
Yeah, so his parents lived up the street, and so I pulled in to their driveway, and they came out like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, and I showed them my leg, and they just lost it. Wow. And they put me in their car and ran me into town, and then I had to get stitched up. And I remember Dad coming to see me in hospital, and just kind of making a joke or something.
Are you serious?
What have you done now? Our relationship was so dysfunctional. But I remember lying on the couch of our house, and Roger, the owner of the company, came over to see me, and his face was white as a ghost.
Wow.
And I think he realized that I could have sued him for not making me wear protective clothes, but I just had no idea about all that stuff. And so, no, nothing happened.
I remember walking in with you on the couch, and it was not a clean cut. It was a jagged. If I remember right, this was not the greatest.
No, I mean, a chainsaw doesn't do a clean job, and the scar is still very vivid, and I still can't feel anything in my upper thigh down to my knee.
Really?
It's completely numb.
Okay, and how many stitches do you remember?
Oh, it was probably about 30.
Okay, and were you under? Did they just numb that area to do that?
Yeah,
or
they
you went
put
under
like
general?
caustic soda in there or something like that. Pussed up, it fizzed, and
Yeah.
it was a pretty ugly sew-up job.
And how long did it take you to recover?
I think I can't remember, but it wasn't as bad as my knee injury, but I think, probably a couple of months.
Okay.
Because it's muscle, it's not like joints are different.
And bones. You didn't break any bones.
No, didn't break any bones.
Well,
And then there was just a string. Like I had a really bad bike accident because I got really into cycling. Got obsessed with cycling, and I remember in the middle of the night down some country lane, way in the middle of nowhere, I hit this massive pothole. It completely crumpled my wheel in half,
wow.
and I kind of forget a lot of them. I mean,
So with the bike accident, didn't your kneecap kind of get ripped off? Was that the moment that happened?
that was a different one. Um, that was a race, the first race of the season, and it was raining, and it was called a criterium. So you're driving around a city center, round and round and round and round. And I was in a pack of probably 50 guys, and one of them wiped out in front of me, and then I pile drived into him, and then I looked behind me, and all these bikes were coming on top of me. And
Wow.
this guy's I got back on my bike, and the guy's like, "Dude, look at your knee." And I looked at it, and it was like hanging off, like
Wow.
my kneecap, not the bone part, but all the flesh that gets up to the bone was just hanging off. And had to go to hospital and get that sewn up, and that recovery took ages, like ages and ages and ages, and it's still to this day a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was a bunch of accidents in between. Like I think Mum thought I was so accident prone. Car accidents for sure. And then the big one was in Toronto after I was already married to Alison, where I fell
Yeah.
off a building and ruptured my spleen and almost died. That was a pretty
Another massive moment and a huge scar to show for it. I remember you called mum before you went into the surgery, and it was a kind of goodbye, because if your spleen had ruptured completely, you would have been dead within minutes, would you not?
Yeah, I mean it. The reason it happened was my still. That was that there was that deep need to please my boss, and we were. It's kind of hard to explain, but we were working on a huge culvert, a concrete culvert at a water treatment plant in Ontario, and we had to pump the water up and over it so that we could work inside it because the culvert was water was constantly coming, and these huge pipes and pumps that were like massive. And as we fired the pumps up, the big rubber pipe started to roll off the culvert. And I should have just put my hands up in the air and let it go, but silly me goes to grab it to try and rescue it. Well, we're
Right.
talking about tons of water. And so it just catapults me into the air, flips me over, and then I land way down in the ditch on my back on rocks. And should have really broken my back. And I remember I couldn't breathe. I was like totally winded. And the guy there called the ambulance. Ambulance picked me up, and I was on the way to hospital. And they were giving me x-rays, and she sat me and she said, "Oh, it sounds like you'll be released from hospital today. I think everything is fine." And she sat me up on the table, the x-ray table, and I shrieked like absolute, like someone was taking a knife and just twisting it in my inside. That's the way it felt. And
Wow.
she's like looked at me like I was totally overreacting. And but she still said, "Oh yeah, you'll probably go home tonight." And then the x-rays got printed out, and the doctor came over to me and he goes, "We have a huge problem. Your spleen has burst inside your stomach. It's flooding through your lungs, towards your lungs, or something like that. If we don't put you into surgery right now, you're going to die." And
Wow.
he goes, "Well, I'm going to put you under. Is there anyone you want to talk to?" I'm like, "Yeah, maybe call my mom." So Alison was there, my first wife. She was panicking. And I called my mum in England. She said, "Hello, lovely darling. How are you doing?" So I'm like,
Yeah, but it's 3 a.m. in the morning, so she
"Yeah,
knows it's not good.
yeah. Mum, I'm about to go into surgery, and the doctor says I might not survive the surgery. So I just wanted to say I love you." "Oh, well, I love you too, dear." I mean, what do you say as a parent?
Oh, well, she was probably in shock as well.
Yeah. And then I said to the doctor, "I don't care what you give me. Just this pain is unbearable." And I have a pretty high pain threshold.
I would say, yeah, after everything you've been through.
Yeah. And so then I went out, and then when I came to, and the next morning, I looked down, and my stomach is stapled together with these huge stainless steel staples. I'm looking at my scar now, and it's probably 10 inches up my stomach. And I had this big syringe beside me in a machine and a button. And every time I pressed the button, it would pump morphine into me. And it would not let me overdose, but it would let me, and so I just loved that morphine. But every time I had a tickle in my throat, my brain told me that your stomach's open, like all the nerves were cut. So I thought my stomach was going to explode onto the ceiling. So if I had a tiny little tickle in my throat, I would buzz the doctor, like panicking. She would
Right.
put a pillow over me. She would lay on top of me, and then I would just go like that. And she'd be like, "Is that it?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." Because my brain was telling me,
Yeah, it's all going to split open.
It's all gonna split open.
So what did you feel when you were told before you went in, when you were told we've got a huge problem here? Was the pain so bad that you couldn't really register anything, or did you feel like I could die? And how did you process that? Or is it just too quick to...
I think I remember the feeling, and the bigger picture is I still struggle with this. I've never valued my own life very much. I think there's a bit of self-pity in there, or maybe that I won't be missed, and part of the reason I got into so many accidents is I had almost this like kamikaze, like if someone was going to dare me, like, "Go on, Jobie, do it," I would do it.
The death wish.
Yeah, it was
almost.
a death wish, and I remember telling someone, was it you? I think it was you. I said, "I like pain. It makes me feel alive."
Yeah. Wow.
And so I felt drawn, and it's not until this recent accident where I almost died, like a year ago, that I've finally realized in my 50 that I finally understood what it was. And I think and so this happened when I was 21, 22, this big one in my stomach. It took me all the way until now to realize what was going on. And so when he said that you might not survive surgery, I really didn't care. I was like, I don't care. Just give me morphine. There was no sense of like, I'm going to be missed or miss someone or anything. I was like, I was totally ready.
Which is interesting to think that was your authentic feeling, because I always think when faced with the possibility of death, that regardless of who you've got to live for, there would be that survival instinct that would panic and go, no, I could imagine just that fear of the unknown, that life slipping away. You obviously had a real lack of value of yourself, or lack of self-love, or something going on, I'd imagine.
100%.
Because most people would just go panic, that you're slipping away, but you didn't have that.
No. Hey, I gotta go pee. 1 second, okay?
Okay. Are you back?
It feels better.
Yeah.
Sounds like Joe Rogan's always doing that. Gotta go pee. So yeah, we were talking about not feeling panicked, and even this recent accident that I had a year ago, I remember feeling this sense of peace came over me. I don't think I've ever really, yeah. But
interesting that you don't have that fight for life when faced with death.
Yeah, I guess there's this deep from childhood understanding of there being a God. So not feeling panicked about that, about what happens after life. Like I had this kind of surrender part of me that's just like I've always kind of said to people, I don't know if there's a heaven. I don't know if there's a hell. I don't know if there's a God. I mean, I obviously used to go through stages when I was convinced there was all of that. All I know is I will have done some things wrong and I will have done some things right. But whatever happens after this life, it's a crapshoot. No one really knows, and I'm like, God, if there is a God, he knows the heart. And I've done lots of things outwardly that aren't great, but he knows the heart, and I've always been really, really sure of that. But yeah. So yeah, at
Interesting.
that point, I never felt panicked. It was like, just stop the pain.
Yeah. Okay.
But I
And
think there
then
was, I don't know how, I think there was a deep lack of self-love.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there was a deep lack of self-love and feeling like,
Your life isn't worth.
no, I was expendable.
Mm. And it's almost like I wonder with that death wish, because I remember during that time talking a lot about the death wish, that you were just playing with fire and pushing life to its limits in some ways
Yeah,
with your lack of regard.
yeah. I was
Almost like a
drawing it.
game.
I was drawing it to me.
Yeah. I remember, did you not have an accident in Toronto where you literally went through the windscreen and landed on your body was on the bonnet of your car?
No, I didn't
Oh,
get that far. My head
okay.
smashed through the window, the front window, and pushed it out like an egg, but didn't actually break through. I
Oh,
think it
well,
would take,
that's pretty bad. I mean,
yeah, it's
think of
pretty bad.
concussion.
And
The
I
how
know.
many? Okay, so your head went through, but it didn't break through completely.
Yeah, I think it's
But
almost impossible to break through a window these days, these modern windows. But yeah, I remember the policeman coming over to me, goes, "Did you have your seatbelt on?" I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "I'm
you
gonna
so
ask you,"
didn't.
and he looked at the window. He's like, "I'm gonna ask you again. Did you have your seatbelt on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I didn't," because there's a big head-shaped dent in the window.
Unbelievable. Didn't you in Elliot Lake? There was a huge icicle that sliced your head open
Yeah, like Elliot
as
Lake
you were. Yeah,
scraping a doorway of snow, and this big icicle, massive one, broke off and came right down onto my head, and then blood was pouring out, and I had to get stitches in my head.
and if it had been just like an inch to the other side, it probably would have caused a lot more damage.
Could have, yeah, it was like a dagger
Wow.
coming, probably dropped around 4 feet. Yeah,
Golly.
but there is lots of accidents, and I mean the recent ones, were really big.
So tell us about your more recent one.
Yeah, so the one that really shook me was I have a tractor here on the farm, and I have an auger on the back of it, which is basically a big drill that drills holes in the ground for fence posts, putting fence posts in. And it was Thanksgiving of the year before last. No, last Thanksgiving. So not this one we just had, the one before that. And Gabe and I were down there digging in fence posts, and so he was in the tractor and I was placing the auger. Like you kind of have to place it and then you drop it down and then it starts to drill. So the last post was right against an existing fence, and the previous owners had put fishing net, like commercial fishing net, as a fence, and they just didn't cut the excess off, and so it was buried under dirt, like, 2 feet or so away from the fence line, but you couldn't see it. It was all under dirt, grass. And so I placed the auger down in the next to the fence, and asked Gabe to start the auger. So he switched it on, and immediately, within a split second, it grabbed the edge of this fishing net, grabbed my boot. I was wearing rubber boots, thank God, and pulled me into the auger. And so, but because I was against a fence, it dragged me around, like I was tight against the existing metal fence. It dragged me around the fence and then started to spin me around. And what was keeping me in there was the fishing net. So I was basically wrapped up in the auger. The fishing net was
Wow.
wrapped on the outside of me, and then the auger just was like spinning. And it took a while for me to actually be able to talk about it without getting. I still have flashbacks that really put me into cold sweats. And I had flashbacks with the chainsaw accident too for a long, long time.
And you were getting chewed up
So
and
this
pulled
thing,
into the
my
ground.
hand, my arm, my left arm went up into the air, and there's kind of a shroud over the knuckle of this big auger that's made out of like metal, and it's like a box cutter, like a X-Acto knife, and it was just chomping. So I wasn't able to make a full revolution around the auger because this thing, my arm was up and it was stopping me from being spun around. So the auger was spinning and it broke all of my ribs on one side. So I think there's 9 ribs on one side and then 2 or 3 of my ribs on the other side as it was chunk, 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 just like hammering my ribs. And my arm was just getting sliced like a box cutter on this big shroud over the knuckle. And my son, I saw his face and it was beet red. He was absolutely terrified. And thankfully he had the composure not to seize up, and he, it's a 2-step process to stop it. You have to push your foot in on the clutch, you have to push a lever up and then let your foot out on the clutch, and then the auger stops spinning. And he did all of that instead of just panicking and running.
Yeah, amazing.
And then I immediately dropped to the ground, and I remember thinking, I've got no torso. Like, it felt like, because I was being twisted around so much, it felt like the bottom part of my body had been separated. My legs had been separated from my body.
Wow.
And I thought it was going to be
look down.
I thought it was going to be a Saving Private Ryan moment, like where I looked
Yeah.
down and there was no legs. Like 100% is
Wow.
what I thought. And I looked down and my legs were still attached. And then I looked at my hand, my arm, and it was gruesome. It looked like something out of a Freddy Krueger movie. And my fingers were still moving. And at the moment that it pulled me into the auger, I remember feeling, the first thought that came into my head was, I can't believe I'm going to go like this.
I remember you saying, this isn't very rock and roll.
Yeah, it was like something like that. I was like, this really? This is it?
This is it?
And then I saw Gabe's face, the terror in his face. And then I knew that I was completely out of, everything was out of my control. And I relaxed. I felt like a sense of peace came over me. And I think in the relaxing is probably why I wasn't more damaged than what I was. I was pretty fucking damaged, but I remember just feeling helpless, and the sense of peace came over me. Had Gabe not been there, or had he frozen up, it would have killed me. And
do you think that's I guess the chainsaw and the exploding of your spleen and this, would those be the 3 closest you've come to death?
Yeah. I mean, I had another one too, another chainsaw one where I was cutting in Warrington Park. I was cutting a beech tree that was huge, probably 6 feet in diameter, and it had fallen down in a storm, and I was just cutting it away from its roots. And I had this huge chainsaw, and I was cutting, and I got to the bottom, and the tree dropped and rolled towards me, and I was just able to jump out of the way, and it completely crushed the chainsaw.
Wow.
And that was a bit of and I've had a few ones with trees. Like I had one on Gambia where the tree exploded. I've got actually a film of it because my camera was going, and it's what you call barbachured. It split right up the middle and splintered off. So yeah, there's been quite a few, and I'm sure they will slowly come to my mind where it's been like, oh shit, like that.
Yeah.
Or,
but ultimately, each time you faced it, you have felt some sort of peace.
Yeah, there's this like some funny relationship I have with death. I think it's I don't love the moment. I don't like, oh yeah, this is it. But I there's this like it draws me to it. This funny chasm between life and death, and that slight little moment in between. And that statement that I think I said to you without even thinking about it, I like danger, I like pain. It makes me feel alive. When I was in hospital, so after this auger, I remember looking at my arm and it was just cut to shreds really bad. And I carried my arm. I said, Gabe, go get help. And he ran up the property, and I had to walk up through a couple acres of our property. And they took me to hospital, and they had to ambulance me to another hospital. And I got sewn up, and I was sitting in hospital the next morning, and I had these photos of my arm before the surgeon took pictures of my arm, and he sent them to me before he sewed it up. And I started sending them to friends of mine.
Well, I've
And
seen them.
yeah, they're really
Pretty
gruesome, right?
grizzly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's shock. It has
I'd
shock.
post it on Instagram, but they might take it down.
Yeah, it has real shock value.
Yeah.
And I was getting, every time I was sending it, obviously I was getting like, holy shit, Jobie. And I think my friends and people that love me have almost not numb to it, but they're kind of like, I don't, like my son, my oldest kids were angry at me. Like, Daddy, why are you doing like, and it slowly has started lately to permeate deeper that this is selfish. Like,
Do you think they're angry with the recklessness?
yeah, they want their dad. And I've never felt I've never quite understood that people actually want me to stick around. It's taken me a lifetime to understand that. And I was in hospital and I was sending these pictures to my friends. And every time I hit send, I felt this kind of hollowness inside me. I was like, what's that? I felt like a bit empty, like you do something naughty and you just kind of feel that awful kind of emptiness afterwards.
Yeah.
And I talked to a therapist that we know, a friend, and she kind of said to me, she said, you need to ask all your friends to remove that picture from their photos and apologize for sending it. Because what I realized in hospital, before I talked to her actually, I was like, holy shit, I'm still a little boy looking for my dad's attention. And this whole time, I realized that the math that happens as a young child, you don't understand the equations that are being made in your head. And I realized, this whole time, my brain did this quick math. Hurt yourself, dad looks at you and cares. He always cared and he loved me, for sure. But I got this look of there was something else that, and so my brain made this quick mathematics, it's like hurt yourself equals love and affection.
Yeah. Special attention.
Yeah. And I've been doing it for 40 years and just walking into the fire, getting hurt, and then all my friends saying, we want you around. Don't be so reckless. We love you. I'm so sorry this happened. And I was like, dang it, I'm still doing that. And so.
And it takes something so extreme to get that message from people.
I think, yeah.
I mean, what I mean is that mechanism of it's almost like, what do they call it? You're calling that you're manifesting something quite extreme in order to get the affirmation that you're looking for.
Yeah, and then the ante has to be upped, right? Oh, you just broke your finger. That's nothing.
Yeah.
And so I've always, pain has this weird relationship with me. I mean, you can turn pain into sexual pleasure, right? That's why people kind of do all this stuff. It's like there is something released when there's pain.
Well, it's endorphins.
Yeah, it's not sexual. It's like, but I know there's sexual pleasure in physical pain, but there's something that's released that's like, I don't understand it, but it's like a chemical thing. And a lot of people I talk to, they don't understand. What are you talking about? Like, but you can, I think I was doing something last night. Oh yeah, I was doing yoga last night. And you know tree pose? Do you do yoga?
I haven't done for a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, tree pose, when you put your foot right up into your kind of crotch area.
Yeah.
And then you stand there. And usually if you're wearing, like shorts, I was wearing underwear when I was doing it, it hurts. It's pulling the hair on it for a man anyway. It's pulling the hair on your leg. But if you kind of, it's same as cold plunging. You can move through that pain and it becomes almost euphoric.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't, so anyway.
So what's interesting is that when you were sending those photos, I think you were waking up to self-awareness, even though you hadn't thought it through entirely.
Yeah.
I would say you were becoming conscious of your behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
had
then
this like
later
epiphany.
it was articulated.
Yeah. And I think that there's so, the longer you go in life, you start to gain more collateral, like the ripples of the damage can be felt so much more. And like my youngest son, watching him, and I actually have a reason to live. It's like I want to be around. I want to see my kids have. And so when you're single, you've got nothing much to lose. But when you have children and a family, it's like I want to be there to see them experience life. And I think I just really didn't want to die. And so, yeah, I'm still working through it. I mean, a year later, I think 8 months, I was like, I'm done with accidents. And I had a conversation with God. I'm like, this death wish is over. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to get hurt anymore.
Yeah.
And it definitely spooked me, this one, because when I went snowboarding the other day, I was like playing it so safe. I'm like, I'm really scared of getting hurt. Like it's really got in my head.
Yeah. It's
And I think
interesting
compounds,
how
right?
your relationship to pain is shifting, or death. Ironically, it's like, finally at 70, I said, I don't want to have this. And then 2 years later, you're old and you're dead.
Yeah.
You played with this relationship with death through your younger years. And then as death comes closer, you're like, actually, I've decided I do want to live after all.
Yeah. I mean, Raven calls me the Terminator. He's like, Dad, you just keep on going. Like, I don't understand how you... And I mean, I still don't get sick. Everyone in the house can get sick. I don't get sick. Like, I do have some kind of thick
Well, my kids would
armor.
say you're the luckiest unlucky man they know, in that you're so lucky that you've cheated death so many times, but really unlucky at how many times death has been at your door.
Yeah.
It's like this strange relationship. But I get it in a watered down version, in that before I had children, if I was on a flight on my own and there was turbulence, I wouldn't feel anxious, because I'm like, well, if I go down, I go down. I feel pretty good about my life, whatever. And then as I have children, the thought of being on a flight and it going down is like, no. I've got 3 kids to raise. This can't happen. I have to be here for them. And I all of a sudden get a bit more anxious about travel and safety, because I've got a lot to live for.
Yeah, and you want to see them. Like, you want to see your kids have kids. And yeah.
And you have a bit more respect for your life, because you've got a lot of responsibility and a lot of reason to be around. Whereas as a single person, I think that disregard you can get away with a bit more, even though it's not great. That responsibility of being a father, you've got a lot to live for.
Yeah, and I mean, I even last night I was thinking, because a friend of ours, I don't know, cancer comes up all the fucking time, right? And the more older you get, the more you hear about it, or maybe it's just seems like everyone and their dog. And I can't help, and I don't know if other people think that, I can't help but when I'm quiet by myself, I'm like, I have this haunting feeling. It's like, when's your turn coming?
Yeah.
And it's like, does everyone feel that? I don't know, but I don't like it. I'm like, I don't want. That's, to me, having a physical, like seeing a scar and saying, okay, that can sew up, and then I can go to the gym and regain the strength in this arm. I can work my way back. But something like this phantom disease like cancer or Alzheimer's, I mean, it's just like you're at the mercy of other people. And I just, but there's this horrible haunting like shadow that seems to follow when you get older. It's like, oh, when's my turn coming? I don't want it to come.
It's that relationship with your mortality that starts to become an actual interaction, where you go, this is inevitable. And I think that it chases everyone. So that is a weird thing that you start to have to look at, especially in your 40s. And as you come into 50s, I imagine it just increases. And then just our grandmother in her 70s says, by the time you get to your 70s, you're not scared of anything. Because in your 40s, you have to look at your aging self, which is a trip, to suddenly have been young for 40 years. And now you get the switch over decade where you get to see actual evidence that you're aging. And I think that's really quite difficult. And then I don't know what we'll face in our 50s and 60s, but I imagine like the ailments will ramp up. But you probably get to your stage in your 70s where you just embrace the fact that you've been old for a really long time now and it's not going anywhere. But I feel like we're in the in-between phase where you still feel youthful and you feel more good than you don't feel good. But you get these moments where I'll feel an ache in my bone and I'm like, is this solvable or is this just my life now? And it's this weird feeling of, I don't know what's here to stay and what I can actually fix. And that's new territory because for so many decades, I've just felt like in great health and that's been my baseline. And at what point do you accept a shift in baseline where, it's really quite sobering.
I mean, I think I'm willing and accepting of the fact that energy will start to fade and you'll start, you see old people, they just fall asleep randomly. And these types of things, but I think what I fear the most is sickness taking me out, like some like grotesque, like I would rather die in a big car crash or a plane going down or something. Just just get it over and done with. But this slow
deterioration.
I was talking to my father-in-law last night. He said his friend who had cancer in her gum, the dentist found, spent $40,000 on treatment, and now she's feeling okay. And it's like, Jesus, like, and her whole face is caved in, and the whole, I don't know, some of this culture is keeping people alive. It's like, no, just in the old days, it's like when you go in, and then you're gone. It's like now, it's like, how long can we squeeze this one out?
I don't know. When it's your life, I think you've got so much skin in the game. You're like, okay, I'm all in.
I wonder if you keep going because of your kids, the pressure of your family. Like, we want you around, Dad. Don't go, Dad.
Well, like you say, that gives you a motivation to live. But at what time do you just go, okay, I'm going to stop whatever and just go with this?
Yeah.
That's quite a brave, bold move.
I mean, now you've
sorry.
Yeah. Well, now you've got this MAIDS program, right? And it's like, I don't know, some people are dead against it, but I kind of think, if you have a terminal sickness and you're really unhappy and it's just like machine, like, I think there's quite a few people that have done that.
Yeah. It's an interesting relationship with our mortality. It's definitely in your 40s, you start to have those thoughts much more. And I'm sure you're finding entering 50, it's like a hump decade.
Yeah.
But,
I kind of like, remember that show Vikings that we were super into, the History Channel?
Yeah.
And there was that old Viking that was pissed off that he kept surviving battles. He was just ready to go to Valhalla.
It's just, I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
And he's like, holy shit, I'm still alive. Damn it. And I think that there's something beautiful about that, Valhalla was like better than living on Earth. And they were just totally stoked to go there.
Yeah.
Instead of we're kind of afraid. I think that's what people said that COVID did, right? It shined a light on our mortality and people were scared shitless.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much hoops we'll jump to not have to face that reality.
Yeah.
That whole thing was like a battle with our concept of mortality or our relationship with mortality.
Yeah. What do you mean we're going to die? Really? Because in the old days, I think someone told me one time that in the UK, most of the doors were a lot wider because they would bring the coffins into the houses. And that a coffee table was a coffin table. I don't know how correct that is.
Interesting. Yeah. That surprised me.
Coffin table. And it changed to a coffee table because the coffin would sit there. But now funerals are, bodies are scurried around the city in secret in white vans. You don't barely ever see a hearse. When we were in Mexico, they really celebrate. They have the Day of the Dead, right? That big, And there was a funeral when we were there, and it was like we were driving and we was like, what's going on? There was this huge crowd of people following this hearse up the road.
You never see that here.
No, it's all done in secret and quiet. And it's
Yeah.
like, we don't want to think about or talk about death. It's keep it secret. But yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I'd like to next time dig into how you got to the Americas.
The Americas.
The Americas, from farm work in the UK to how you landed 30 years ago in the US and then Canada, because that's an interesting story.
And you're off to Paris, aren't you?
Paris, this time next week, I'll be in Paris, which will,
so fun.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really good. First time I've taken the kids away in since I came to see you, probably 6 years ago.
Wow.
So a big moment for us. And I think it will be really good for us.
And who are you meeting there? Martha?
Martha, Sophie, Mum.
Oh, Mum's coming.
Yeah, she's coming. It's going to be a girls' getaway. And
she's gotten over the fact
Florence.
That you're not going to see her in England?
Yeah, I think so. I think she understands and has embraced it. So yeah, Israel and Florence will be there. So it's a girls' trip of about 8 of us.
Oh, wow. So, you're going to have an absolute blast.
A hoot. I really hope we do. And my kids are just beside themselves excited. So we need this.
How long ago was it when you and me and Sophie and Martha were in Paris?
11 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the last time we were all together as siblings.
Yeah. That was a good time.
No, actually, your wedding. Your wedding to Terra. That might have been the last time.
Oh, yeah, true.
That's probably 8 years ago. Tragic.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Tragic how time flies.
Yeah. And that we don't get together enough. But yeah, I think I'll have to call it a day.
Okay.
And yeah, let's connect when I get back from Paris.
All right. Love you, Abby.
All right. Love
Chats.
you.
Bye.
Bye.